Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the iconic 205 GTI. In 1984, the Peugeot 205 GTI, the original, the 1.6, which is what I'm driving today, really was the start of a new era for Peugeot. Previously, they'd been quite a safe company. All their cars were branded to be quite safe. They weren't anywhere. They're not what you would call a sporty brand, if you like. And of course, they brought this to market. The 205 GTI from Peugeot really built upon the success that the MK1 Golf GTI had already had. And in fact, the 205 proved to be equally as popular for Peugeot. In fact, in 1990, some 7-8 years after Peugeot initially released the 205, it won Car of the Decade by Car Magazine. Just goes to show how special and how good even these standard cars were. I'll probably talk less about the history of the car because it's not really my place to speak on, and rather talk about this particular car itself. So they did a 1.9 variant later on. This, as I said, is a 1.6 which came out first, and there's some debate between the owners at least about which one is the best. The 1.6 had a peppier, revier engine, whereas the 1.9 naturally had a slightly longer stroke and therefore was a lot torquier. The 1.9 is actually the more desired variant of the two, and that means that this 1.6 version can be picked up for a lot cheaper than you would pay for a 1.9. This car is actually owned by OEM Plus, and again, thank you to them for letting me borrow this car, because I'm getting to drive cars that I thought I could only ever dream of driving. These cars are the sort of cars that, although they were slightly before my time and they weren't really the pin-up poster cars or the attainable, affordable cars of what I thought I could own as a kid. I was more into Clio 172s, etc., which is why I've got one. They still hold a special place. It's such a fantastic little balanced car. One of the key things about the 1.6, and in fact both variants of the 205 GTI and earlier hot hatches and cars in general, they were a lot lighter. You don't have any of the safety precautions put in place. So you don't have things like airbags, you don't have massive A-pillars, and etc. So the amount of weight that is saved in these cars because of the lack of safety features is really quite astonishing. In fact, the curb weight for this is probably circa 800 kilos, maybe even less, which means that you don't need a whole load of power to really enjoy yourself. But the key thing here, and what stands out, is that this car is so poised and balanced. It might be 35 years old, but it certainly doesn't handle like a car that's 35 years old. It feels really refined. It's actually quite refreshing to not have a whole load of weight up front, which you would typically get in a front-wheel drive hot hatch, a modern one anyway, and you have all these computer wizardries and bits of tech in order to get you around the corner quicker. This is very raw and visceral, but there's something quite enjoyable about that experience. Of course, because of the lack of safety precautions, you wouldn't exactly want to have a crash in this thing. In fact, I think you'd be pretty worse for wear. If you look at the A-pillars and how thin they are in this car, they're virtually non-existent. And that goes the same with the actual dashboard. There's no airbag on the steering wheel, there's no airbag in the dash, and the bulkhead is incredibly thin. In fact, I don't know if you can hear it, I'll try and pick it up on audio, but you can hear the engine sort of burbling away underneath there, and when you really give it some, you can hear it come through the bulkhead because it's so thin, and I like that. It's cool. You wouldn't get that these days. You get sound deadening, you get everything else. I've got to take it slightly easy in this car because the tyres aren't the best and the roads are slightly damp. The balance in this thing is just unbelievable. It's so poised. And one of the cool things as well about the lack of sound deadening, the lack of comfort, so to speak, that we get in a more modern car is that you don't have to go 1,000,000 miles an hour in order to feel like you're going quick. So you can think you're going, you know, flat out, and you'll look down and you're doing 60, the national speed limit, which is brilliant because you don't have to worry about going over the speed limit. You can enjoy yourself within the remits of the law, and still this car brings out a smile on your face. You would expect a car that's getting on to 34 years old to start to really feel a bit tired, a little bit slow, a little bit sluggish, and really quite docile to drive, but that isn't the case with this car. It's got a real fizz to it. It wants you to be driven. You can sense that this is what laid down the foundations for manufacturers for years to come. This is what they did. This is the recipe, a lightweight hatch. Things have changed over the years, but ultimately this laid the foundations and set the precedent for the future, and you can really get a sense of that. I believe this car later inspired the Group B style rally, and I think that's kind of one of the cool things about this. I think Peugeot homologated this 205 GTI and built a short number or a short run of T16 versions, and the purpose of that was to basically get the car into WRC. So they had to build a certain number, they had to have a certain spec, so they were pretty much a 205 GTI shell on a completely different chassis, albeit, but this car does hold that pedigree. I mean, the car did well as well. It's often forgotten about and overshadowed. The Audi Quattro often steals a lot of the limelight, and I mean the Lancia for being the first car to ever win, a rear-wheel drive car to ever win a rally, etc. But the T16 version of this, the Group B variant, actually did really well, and it often gets overshadowed, unfortunately. And to know that this car has that pedigree and kind of comes from that dynasty is quite special. These days, Peugeot, in my opinion, probably don't make amazing hot hatches. They got the 308, and that's okay, but they're kind of, the market for them has become quite small, and it's more dominated by the likes of Ford and Renault still. I also love the fact that this car is so analog. Look at the dash and all the buttons, etc. You've got the little needle on the speedometer dances around too, which is a nice touch, and I'm reassured that apparently lots of them did back in the day. It's just the way it was, and that's kind of cool. Like, it still tells you the speed, but albeit like this. So I think ultimately it would be unfair to compare this 205 GTI or any hot hatch of this era to a more modern car. If I came across now a more modern hatch, I wouldn't have a hope of keeping up. Even the best driver on a normal road, it just wouldn't happen. The cars these days are far too quick. However, this car isn't all about straight line speed. It's not about how quick you go. It's about the way the car makes you feel. And this car, to me, encapsulates everything that a hot hatch should be. It's not overly quick. It's not over the top. In fact, there's nothing in here that's fancy, but it's so exciting to drive. It's so engaging, so poised, so balanced, and really just such an enjoyable car. It really is. In essence, then, the 205 GTI deserves the title of the most iconic hot hatch ever, because it is all that a hot hatch should be. It's as simple as that, and therefore that's why I think that it should be, or is, the most iconic hot hatch of all time. Anyway guys, I really hope you've enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe for more hot hatch and all sorts of car content coming soon. Thanks for watching.